The city of Atlanta was still stretching its concrete limbs in the pre-dawn glow when the call came in. For Detective Roman Rowe Griggs, the shrill ring of his phone was a familiar harbinger of chaos, a sound that sliced through the quiet hum of his apartment and signaled the end of someone's world. This time, the world that had ended belonged to Preston Sinclair. Preston wasn't just a name, he was a brand, a celebrated black architect who had reshaped Atlanta's skyline with towers of glass and steel that seemed to defy gravity. His designs were bold, innovative, and unapologetically modern, which made the scene of his death an exercise in brutal irony. He was found in his personal design studio in Midtown, a minimalist sanctuary of white walls, polished concrete, and natural light, now desecrated by the primal chaos of a violent end. Roman stepped under the yellow tape, the air inside the studio thick with the metallic tang of blood and the sterile scent of cleaning solution used by the first responders. Preston Sinclair lay near a sprawling drafting table, his life bled out onto a floor that was likely sealed to be stain-proof. There were no signs of a struggle in the wider room, no overturned furniture, no shattered glass. Just the still, silent body. The ME confirmed it was multiple stab wounds, delivered with a savage precision. But as Roman began his methodical sweep of the scene, a sense of profound unease settled over him. It wasn't the violence. He was tragically accustomed to that. It was the silence, the digital silence. Preston's state-of-the-art smartphone lay on a charging pad on his desk, untouched. Roman, gloved and careful, picked it up. He expected to find the digital residue of a final confrontation, a flurry of angry texts, a record of a late-night call. Instead, he found nothing. The call logs for the past 24 hours were sparse. The message threads were clean, showing only mundane exchanges with his wife, Celeste, and his business partner, Malik. It was too clean, impossibly clean. A man like Preston Sinclair, a hub of constant communication, didn't just have a quiet evening. This wasn't silence, it was a void. It felt scrubbed, sanitized, as if someone had meticulously wiped away the final hours of the man's life. "This feels wrong," Roman murmured to his partner, Detective Eva Rostova. "A guy this connected, his phone goes dead quiet the night he's murdered. It's like someone came in and tidied up after the killing." His eyes scanned the desk again, landing on an empty velvet display stand. It was small, clearly designed to hold a letter opener or a decorative dagger. An indentation in the velvet showed the clear outline of what was once there. It was gone. The murder weapon, Roman guessed, had been a part of the decor. Personal. The killer hadn't brought a weapon. They had found one. He scrolled through the contacts on the phone, the list A who's who of Atlanta's elite. Then he saw a name that seemed out of place, saved without a last name, a single word, Savannah. Unlike the others, there was no call history, no message thread, just a name and a number, a digital ghost in an otherwise sterilized machine. The void on the phone screamed louder than any visible evidence. In a city that never stopped talking, Preston Sinclair's final hours had been rendered mute. Roman knew that crimes of passion were loud. They left a messy trail of emotions, texts, and voicemails. This felt different. This felt calculated. Someone had not only taken Preston's life, they had tried to erase the reason why. And that, Roman knew, was the mark of a killer who was far more dangerous than a jilted lover. They were a ghost, and his only clue was a single name in a silent phone. The name Savannah was a thin thread, but it was the only one Roman had. A quick database search connected the number to Savannah Monet, a 24-year-old with a negligible employment history, but a social media footprint the size of a small country. Her Instagram was a shrine to a life of impossible luxury, a curated feed of poolside cocktails, private jets, and designer everything. The source of that lifestyle became painfully obvious when the financials came back. Preston Sinclair had been wiring her a small fortune every month. Roman sent a car for her. When Savannah Monet walked into the interrogation room, she was the picture of unbothered grace. Dressed in expensive but understated clothes, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who knew her own value, or at least the value someone else had placed on her. "I don't know what you want from me," she said, her voice steady. "Preston and I had a relationship. I won't deny that, but I haven't seen him in 2 days." "His phone records tell a different story," Roman lied, testing the waters. "Or rather, the lack of them does. His phone was wiped clean. Why would someone do that, Savannah? She shrugged, a gesture of elegant indifference. I have no idea. Preston was a very private man. She was good, cool, collected, and giving him nothing. But while Savannah was stonewalling him in the interrogation room, a different kind of conversation was happening in the digital forensics lab. Roman had sent Preston's phone to the cybercrimes unit with a specific request: treat it like it's hiding something. He was in the middle of a fruitless back and forth with Savannah when his own phone buzzed. It was Marcus, the lead tech. Ro, you need to see this. Roman left Savannah stewing and headed down to the sterile, climate-controlled basement lab. Marcus pointed to a complex diagram on his monitor. Your hunch was right. The phone's primary storage was wiped, but it was a clumsy job. Whoever did it didn't know about the partitioned hard drive. Preston had a hidden encrypted section, sandboxed from the main OS. Can you get in? Roman asked, his pulse quickening. Already did, Marcus said with a grin. He was running a ghost app, one of those encrypted messaging platforms that hides its own icon. Took a while to crack, but we're in. And what we found? It's a novel. On the screen, a message thread bloomed to life. It was between Preston and Savannah, and it was the opposite of the silent void on the main phone. It was a raging inferno, hundreds of messages all sent in the 48 hours leading up to the murder. They were a torrent of raw, unfiltered emotion. Savannah, you promised me. You promised you were leaving her. Preston, it's not that simple. These things take time. Savannah, I'm tired of waiting in the shadows. I'm not your dirty little secret anymore. You fix this or I will. The messages grew more frantic, more desperate. Accusations, threats, ultimatums. It was a relationship imploding in real time. The final message, sent from Savannah's phone just hours before the estimated time of death, was chilling. Savannah, I swear to God, Preston, if you don't answer my call, I'm coming over there right now and I will burn your whole world to the ground. Roman stared at the screen. The silence hadn't been an absence of evidence. It had been a container for it. The killer had tried to clean the crime scene, but they had only managed to sweep the real clues under a digital rug. Now, that rug had been pulled back, revealing the rage, the motive, and the prime suspect. The ghost in the machine had just given Savannah Monet a voice, and it was screaming murder. With the encrypted messages painting a clear picture of motive, the investigation zeroed in on Savannah. But Roman knew he had to perform his due diligence. That meant a formal interview with the grieving widow, Celeste Sinclair. He met her at the palatial Buckhead mansion she had shared with her husband, a place that felt more like a museum than a home. Celeste was the epitome of old money grace. Dressed in mourning black, she was composed, articulate, and radiated a quiet, dignified sorrow. She sat opposite Roman in a formal living room, offering him tea as if he were a guest for a social call, not a homicide detective investigating her husband's murder. I knew Preston had his indiscretions, detective, she said, her voice a low, cultured murmur. It was a painful part of our marriage, but we were working through it. I never imagined it would lead to something like this. She projected the perfect image of a wronged but forgiving wife. When Roman asked about her husband's phone habits, she gave a small, sad smile. Preston and his gadgets. He was always installing new apps, concerned with security. He said it was for work, to protect his designs. I'm afraid I'm rather old-fashioned. I wouldn't know the first thing about encrypted partitions or ghost apps. Her ignorance seemed genuine, effectively distancing her from the digital battlefield where her husband's final battle had been waged. She was positioning herself as a victim not only of her husband's infidelity, but also of a modern world she didn't quite understand. But as the interview progressed, Roman felt a subtle dissonance. Celeste spoke of their life together in broad, almost generic strokes, like someone reading from a well-rehearsed script. She spoke of his success, their shared charity work, their status in the community. It was all about the public face of their marriage. Roman decided to probe deeper, to find the person behind the facade. Did you notice any changes in your husband's behavior recently? Anything out of the ordinary besides this affair? Celeste paused, her teacup hovering in midair. For the first time, a flicker of something real, annoyance perhaps, crossed her face. As a matter of fact, yes, she said, her tone shifting slightly. For the past few months, Preston had become obsessed. Obsessed with what? His ancestry, she said, the word dripping with a faint disdain. He hired genealogists, spent hours poring over old documents and maps. He was determined to trace his family line back as far as he could. I told him it was a foolish indulgence, a midlife crisis. Our past is our past. It's the future we build that matters. She presented it as a harmless eccentricity, a trivial hobby. But the way she spoke about it, as an annoyance, a distraction from their carefully constructed life, struck Roman as odd. Why would a wife be so dismissive of her husband's search for his roots? It felt like she was minimizing something, waving away a topic she found uncomfortable. Roman left the mansion with a sense of unease. Celeste Sinclair played the part of the grieving widow flawlessly. She was cooperative, poised, and seemingly transparent. But beneath the surface of polite sorrow, Roman sensed a will of iron and a carefully guarded world. Her casual dismissal of Preston's genealogical quest felt like a locked door. And Roman Griggs was a man who couldn't stand locked doors. He had a feeling that the key to Preston Sinclair's future and his murder might just be hidden in the very past Celeste was so eager to dismiss. Next on Roman's list was Malik Crawford, Preston Sinclair's business partner. If Celeste represented the old-world pillar of Preston's life, Malik was the new. He was the brilliant protege Preston had mentored, the kid from the rough side of town who, under Preston's wing, had become a titan of Atlanta real estate in his own right. Roman found him in the sleek, minimalist offices of Sinclair Crawford Designs, the very firm that had put them both on the map. Malik was a mess. His eyes were red-rimmed, his designer suit was rumpled, and he paced his office like a man trying to outrun his own grief. "I can't believe he's gone, man," Malik said, his voice cracking. He sank into a leather chair, burying his face in his hands. "He was my brother. He gave me everything." His grief felt raw and authentic. He spoke at length about their shared journey, their struggles, and their triumphs. He also expressed a deep, venomous anger towards Savannah Monet. "I knew she was poison," he spat. "I warned him. A girl like that, she doesn't love you. She loves what you can do for her. When he told her he was going to cut her off, she must have snapped." Malik's narrative was clean and compelling. He corroborated Celeste's story of the affair and pointed the finger squarely at Savannah. When Roman asked about the wiped phone, Malik had a ready answer. "That's her for sure," he said with conviction. "She kills him, then grabs his phone and deletes everything to cover her tracks. She's not just a gold digger, she's a smart one." It was a plausible theory, one that fit perfectly with the evidence they had from the encrypted app. Malik was painting himself as the loyal friend, the grieving brother, the reliable witness. But, as with Celeste, Roman felt a subtle undercurrent of something not quite right. While Malik praised Preston as a mentor and a genius, there was a faint, almost imperceptible edge of professional jealousy in his tone. Roman decided to do some digging. He had a source inside the city's planning commission, a man who owed him a favor. A quick, off-the-record phone call revealed something interesting. "Yeah, we were all surprised," the source told him. "Everyone thought Sinclair Crawford would be the lead on the new Riverwalk project. It's the biggest municipal contract in a decade. But Sinclair came in and pitched it solo, put his own name on the proposal, not the firm's, cut his partner right out of the loop. Happened about 2 months ago, caused a real stir." This was a bombshell. While Malik was publicly playing the part of the devoted partner behind the scenes, his mentor had just sidelined him from the most lucrative project of their careers. Roman pulled the firm's financial records and the emails between the two men. The professional correspondence was polite, but Roman could read the tension between the lines. Then he found it, a series of increasingly frantic emails from Malik to Preston, demanding to know why he had been excluded. Preston's replies were cool and evasive. The last email from Malik, sent a week before the murder, was practically vibrating with rage. "After all I've done for this firm, for you, this is how you repay me. You think you can just cut me out and I'll say nothing? This isn't over, Preston, not by a long shot." Roman sat back in his chair, the pieces clicking into place. Malik Crawford wasn't just grieving a lost brother. He was a partner who had been profoundly betrayed. His financial future had been threatened, his ego bruised, and his loyalty thrown back in his face. Suddenly, his vehement finger-pointing at Savannah looked less like a quest for justice and more like a desperate attempt to deflect suspicion. Malik had a motive as powerful as any scorned lover. The cold, hard fury of a business partnership gone wrong. The case against Savannah Monet seemed to be solidifying. They had the recovered texts, a clear narrative of an obsessive lover pushed to the brink. The DA's office was practically salivating, ready to feed the media the sensational story of the Instagram killer. Captain Davies was on Roman's back, pushing him to make an arrest and close the case. "The evidence is digital, it's damning, and it's all we need," he argued. "Let's not overcomplicate this, Ro." But Roman resisted. Something still felt off. Savannah's cool denial in the face of the evidence was unnerving. So he held off on the arrest warrant, a decision that earned him a heated reprimand from Davies. It was a risky move, one that put his own judgment on the line. His gamble paid off 2 days later in the most unexpected way. Savannah's high-priced defense attorney called him. "Detective Griggs," the lawyer said, his voice smooth and confident. "I believe you're about to waste a great deal of the city's time and money. My client has an alibi, and it is, as you tech people like to say, verifiable." Roman was skeptical. "I've heard that one before." "Not like this, you haven't," the lawyer replied. "We'll be sending over the file. I suggest you have your best tech expert look at it." An hour later, the file arrived. It contained data from an exclusive invitation-only social media platform Roman had never even heard of. On the night of the murder, during the exact window of time the MEE had established for Preston's death, Savannah Monet had been conducting a live, interactive video stream. It was for a private, subscribed group of her followers, a promotional event for a luxury brand of skincare. Roman's first instinct was that it was faked, a pre-recorded video, a looped stream. He took the data to Marcus in the cybercrimes lab. "Tell me this is fake," Roman said. Marcus spent the next 4 hours analyzing the data package. He traced the IP address, authenticated the server logs, and analyzed the metadata embedded in the video stream. He even cross-referenced the live comments from her followers, which were time-stamped from servers all over the world. Finally, he leaned back in his chair, rubbing his tired eyes. "It's real, Ro," he said, a note of awe in his voice. "This isn't just a video. It's a complete digital snapshot. The stream originated from her apartment's unique IP address. The geolocation data from her phone, which was running the app, places her there for the entire 2-hour duration of the stream. There are dozens of real-time interactions with verified users. She was online, in her apartment, selling face cream while Preston Sinclair was being murdered. The case that had seemed so certain just hours before had just imploded. The hundreds of threatening hidden messages were real. The rage was real. The motive was real. But the suspect was, impossibly, innocent. Roman stood in his office, staring at the evidence board. The central pillar of his investigation had been kicked out from under him. The encrypted texts weren't the key to the murder. They were a massive, misleading coincidence. It was the perfect red herring. Someone else had killed Preston Sinclair, and they had gotten incredibly lucky. They had committed a murder on the very night that the victim's volatile mistress happened to be creating an unbreakable digital alibi for herself. The investigation was back to square one, but worse. Now it was a cold case with its only promising lead officially exonerated. The pressure from his superiors, who had been so sure of Savannah's guilt, was about to become unbearable. The case was no longer just a dead end. It was a professional nightmare. The Sinclair case went cold, fast. With Savannah Monet cleared, the investigation lost all momentum. Malik Crawford had a motive, but a plausible denial. Celeste Sinclair had a motive, but an airtight alibi. The murder weapon was still missing. For weeks, Roman felt like he was chasing ghosts. He found himself returning to the one detail that felt out of place, the one loose thread in the otherwise pristine lives of his suspects. Preston's sudden obsession with his ancestry. Celeste had dismissed it as a midlife crisis. Malik had claimed to know nothing about it, but Roman couldn't shake the feeling that it was important. Why would a man dedicated to building the future become so consumed by the past? One evening, driven by a frustration he couldn't articulate, Roman went back to Preston's studio, which was still sealed as a crime scene. He wasn't looking for physical evidence anymore. He was looking for understanding. He walked past the bloodstains on the floor and stood before the large drafting table where Preston had worked. It was covered with blueprints for a skyscraper in Dubai, a testament to his global success. But underneath them, tucked away in a flat file drawer, Roman found something else. It was a different set of drawings. These weren't of gleaming towers of steel. They were meticulous, hand-drawn architectural renderings of a 19th century plantation house. The notes in the margins were detailed, almost obsessive, referencing historical photographs and survey maps. The project was labeled Sinclair Restoration, and the location was a plot of land in rural Wilkes County, Georgia, about 2 hours east of Atlanta. A new question took root in Roman's mind. Why was a forward-looking architect like Preston Sinclair secretly fixated on recreating a relic of the Old South? This was more than a hobby. It was a mission. Following a hunch that felt more like a whisper from the grave, Roman decided to take a trip. He requisitioned the K-9 unit, telling a skeptical Captain Davies he was re-evaluating the geographic parameters of the investigation. The truth was, he didn't know what he was looking for. He just knew he had to go. He and Officer Martinez, with the German Shepherd Kilo in the back, drove out to the address from the blueprints. It was a forgotten piece of land, overgrown with kudzu and towering pines. All that remained of the old plantation were a few crumbling brick pillars and the stone foundation of the main house. For hours, Kilo worked the area, his powerful nose sweeping over the damp earth. He found nothing. Roman was about to call it a day, feeling the familiar sting of a dead-end lead, when Kilo suddenly veered away from the main foundation. He trotted towards a smaller, almost completely overgrown stone outline in the ground, a short distance from the main house. It would have been the foundation of an outbuilding, perhaps a smokehouse or a slave cabin. Kilo became agitated, whining and circling the area. Then he began to dig frantically at a spot near the corner of the old foundation, sending clumps of red Georgia clay flying. He stopped and let out a series of sharp, insistent barks. Martinez brought over a shovel. A few feet down, the shovel struck something hard with a metallic thud. Working carefully, they unearthed a small, heavily corroded metal box. It was old, the lock rusted shut. Back at the lab, the forensics team carefully pried it open. Inside, protected from the elements by oilcloth, were a stack of brittle yellowed letters and a single faded daguerreotype photograph. The photo, taken sometime in the late 1800s, showed a group of black men, women, and children standing in front of a modest cabin. On the back, written in faint, spidery script, was a single phrase: the Sinclairs, Wilkes Plantation. The letters told their story. They were the ancestors of Preston Sinclair, and they had been enslaved on this very land. Preston hadn't just been tracing his roots, he had found them. And he had discovered that his family's journey to the heights of Atlanta had begun in the dirt and sorrow of a plantation cabin. The secret he had unearthed wasn't just his own, it was a piece of buried American history. And Roman had a chilling feeling that this discovery was the very thing that had signed his death warrant. The discovery of the metal box and the truth of Preston Sinclair's ancestry changed the entire complexion of the case. It was no longer just about money or a secret affair. It was about history, legacy, and a past that refused to stay buried. Armed with this new context, Roman paid another visit to Preston's estate lawyer, Harold Finch. This time, Roman didn't ask about business contracts. He asked about history. "Mr. Finch," Roman began, laying a copy of the faded photograph on the polished mahogany desk. "We know Preston was researching his family history. We believe this is them. What we don't know is why it was so important to him." Finch stared at the photograph for a long moment, his professional composure seeming to crumble. He let out a long, weary sigh. "Because of who owned them, detective," he said, his voice low. Preston's research didn't just uncover his own family's past. He uncovered his wife's as well. Roman felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. "What are you saying?" "The plantation in those drawings, the land where you found that box, it was the ancestral home of the Devereaux family," Finch explained. "Celeste's family, her great-great-grandfather was the man who owned Preston's ancestors. They were his property." The revelation was staggering. The perfect high society marriage between new money and old was built on a foundation of historical horror. Preston Sinclair, the self-made Black Titan, was married to the descendant of the very family that had enslaved his own. "Did Celeste know?" Roman asked. "Oh yes," Finch confirmed. Preston confronted her with the information about a month before he died. According to him, she was apoplectic, not with guilt, but with rage that he would dare to dredge up what she called unpleasant and irrelevant history. Her family's name, their legacy, is everything to her. But the story got worse. This discovery prompted Preston to make a decision, the lawyer continued, his expression grim. He came to me the week before his murder. He wanted to change his will, radically. Finch explained the terms. Preston, deeply moved and horrified by his discovery, had decided to use his entire fortune as a form of reparative justice. He was liquidating his assets to create a massive foundation. Its sole purpose would be to provide grants and scholarships to the descendants of other families who had been enslaved at the Devereaux plantation. He was, in his words, balancing the scales, Finch said. It was an act of profound historical conscience, but it would have come at a catastrophic cost to his wife. The new will would have left her with almost nothing. More than that, the very act of creating the foundation would have publicly exposed her family's history as slaveholders. It would have destroyed the pristine, philanthropic reputation she has spent her entire life building. It would have been, for her, a fate worse than death. Roman finally understood. This was the motive. Not a simple case of a wife being cut out of a will, but a woman of immense pride and social standing being threatened with total and complete public humiliation. Her entire identity, built on a carefully curated history, was about to be obliterated by her own husband. The timeline was crucial. Preston confronted Celeste with the truth. She reacted with fury. He then moved to change the will, and shortly thereafter, he was murdered. Her alibi in Savannah was still perfect. She couldn't have held the knife. But Roman now knew, with absolute certainty, that the order to kill Preston Sinclair had come from his wife. He just had to prove how she did it from 250 miles away. Celeste Sinclair's alibi was a fortress, but Roman Griggs knew that even fortresses have secret passages. If Celeste hadn't committed the murder herself, she had used a proxy. His investigation shifted from the who to the how. He began digging into Celeste's life with a ferocity that bordered on obsession, looking for any communication, any payment, any connection that seemed out of place. His team combed through her financials, her phone records, her emails. On the surface, everything was pristine. Charitable donations, calls to her society friends, emails with caterers for upcoming galas. It was the carefully managed life of a professional philanthropist. But Roman knew the real planning wouldn't be in plain sight. He focused on a charity organization Celeste chaired, one that funded arts programs in underprivileged communities. He pulled their full financial disclosures, a mountain of paperwork. He spent 2 nights poring over every line item, every invoice, every consulting fee, and then he found it. A series of monthly payments listed as security consulting made out to a firm called Apex Solutions. The payments were substantial, far more than a small charity would typically spend on security. A quick search revealed that Apex Solutions was a one-man operation run out of a P.O. box. The man's name was Julian Croft, a former private investigator whose license had been revoked for illegal surveillance tactics. He was now a fixer, a discreet professional who solved problems for the wealthy that couldn't be solved through legal channels. The payments from the charity to Croft had started the week after Preston had confronted Celeste with his genealogical discovery. They had stopped the day after the murder. It was the secret passage Roman had been looking for. Celeste had used the charity's funds, her own philanthropic kingdom, to hire her weapon. At the same time, Roman's team was re-examining Malik Crawford. His alibi for the night of the murder was weak. He claimed to be home alone, but they had no physical evidence to link him to the scene. Roman decided to look at Malik's personal finances, and what he found was a man on the brink of disaster. Malik's flashy lifestyle was a facade. He was drowning in debt from a series of bad personal investments. The Sinclair Crawford firm was his only lifeline, and being cut out of the Riverwalk project had been a devastating blow. He was desperate. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when Roman cross-referenced the 2 investigations. He discovered that the secret project Preston had been working on alone, the project he had cut Malik out of, was the historical restoration of the Wilkes County plantation. The blueprints in his studio weren't just a hobby. They were a plan. Preston intended to use his personal funds to turn the site of his ancestors' enslavement into a museum and memorial. This discovery connected the two primary suspects in a way Roman hadn't anticipated. Celeste was threatened by the public revelation of her family's past. Malik was threatened by being excluded from a project that, while personal to Preston, would have been a landmark architectural achievement, and a financially lucrative one once the foundation was established. They both had powerful independent reasons to want Preston's project, and by extension, Preston himself, to disappear. The mask of the perfect grieving widow was beginning to crack, and the image of the loyal, heartbroken partner was dissolving. Roman now saw them for what they were, two people from different worlds, a society queen and an ambitious upstart, both pushed to the edge by the same man. The question was no longer if they were involved. It was how their separate, desperate paths had converged on a single bloody night in a midtown studio. Roman Griggs sat in the quiet of his office late at night, the city lights twinkling below. He stared at the evidence board, which was now a complex web of connections, motives, and timelines. The truth he was seeing was more complex and more terrifying than he had initially imagined. It wasn't one conspiracy, it was two. He saw two separate plots, born from two different desperations, aimed at the same man, and set to collide on the same fatal night. It was a perfect storm of betrayal and violence. On one side was Celeste. Driven by a cold, aristocratic fury, she had hired Julian Croft, the fixer. Her objective was likely not murder, at least not initially. She was a strategist, not a butcher. Roman pieced together her likely plan. Croft was to intimidate Preston, perhaps steal or destroy his genealogical research, and convince him to abandon his plans for the will and the foundation. It was a high-stakes power play, designed to protect her family's name and fortune. She had set her piece in motion, confident that her professional problem solver would handle the delicate matter with force and discretion. On the other side was Malik. He was a man in a different kind of crisis. He was facing financial ruin and the sting of profound personal and professional betrayal. His motivation was hotter, more immediate. He wasn't trying to protect the legacy. He was trying to save himself. When he discovered he had been cut out of the plantation restoration project, Preston's new passion, it was the final insult. Roman imagined Malik, stewing in a potent cocktail of rage and panic, deciding he had to confront Preston himself. His plan was likely impulsive, not as calculated as Celeste's. He was going to demand his share, threaten to expose Preston's affair, do whatever it took to get back in. They were on a collision course, Roman said to an empty room. He could see the night unfolding with horrifying clarity. Malik, driven by his own desperation, decides to go to Preston's studio late that night to have it out with him once and for all. He uses his key, lets himself in. The confrontation begins. It's heated, personal. Accusations fly. Preston, already on edge from his fight with Savannah and the pressure from his wife, tells Malik he's finished. Meanwhile, Celeste's hired gun, Julian Croft, is also on his way to the studio, following his own set of instructions. His job is to intimidate, to apply pressure. But Malik gets there first. The argument between the two partners escalates from words to shoves. It becomes physical. Malik, blinded by rage and seeing his entire life crumbling before him, sees the decorative dagger on the desk. The gift from Celeste, a bitter symbol of the life he can never have. And he snaps. This was the theory that made sense of everything. It explained why there were two powerful, independent motives. It explained why the crime scene felt both personal, the use of a desk item as a weapon, and clean, the wiped phone, a panicked but calculated attempt to deflect blame. The most chilling part of Roman's realization was the terrible cosmic timing of it all. If Malik had gone to the studio an hour later, he would have found Preston being threatened by Croft. If Croft had arrived an hour earlier, he might have been the one to get into a fatal altercation. But on that specific night, at that specific hour, two separate streams of animosity and desperation flowed into one room and erupted. Celeste Sinclair hadn't ordered a murder, but she had sent a loaded gun to a knife fight, and Malik Crawford had pulled the trigger. Armed with his theory, Roman Griggs brought them both in. He put Celeste Sinclair and Malik Crawford in separate interrogation rooms on opposite ends of the homicide floor. He wanted them isolated, unable to communicate, stewing in their own fear. He decided to start with the one he believed had blood on his hands, Malik. Malik entered the room with a nervous bravado, still trying to play the part of the wronged business partner. "I've told you everything I know, Detective," he started. Roman didn't respond. He just sat down and placed a single file on the table between them. He opened it to reveal Malik's personal bank statements, the pages highlighted in red, showing his massive debt. Then he placed the solo proposal for the Riverwalk project next to it. Finally, he added the blueprints for the Sinclair restoration. "This is the story of a desperate man, Malik," Roman said, his voice low and even. "A man about to lose everything. A man betrayed by the one person he trusted. Tell me what happened when you went to the studio that night." Malik's face went pale. I wasn't there." "Don't lie to me," Roman's voice hardened. "We have a witness who saw your car in the area. We have your furious emails. The lies are over." It was a bluff. They had no such witness, but it was delivered with absolute conviction. Malik stared at the papers, his facade crumbling. His shoulders slumped and a tremor ran through his body. He was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was a broken whisper. "He was going to destroy me," Malik said, the words spilling out. "He called me a parasite. He said he made me and he could unmake me. We argued. It got physical. He was so much stronger than me. He pushed me against the wall." Tears streamed down Malik's face as he recounted the final, fatal moments. "I saw the dagger on his desk, the one she gave him. I grabbed it. I didn't even think. I just wanted him to stop looking at me like I was nothing." He confessed everything, the stabbing in a fit of uncontrollable rage, the terrifying clarity that followed, the panicked decision to grab the knife and Preston's phone. "I wiped the phone," he admitted. "I knew about his fights with Savannah. I figured if I cleared the recent logs, you guys would dig deeper, find their secret messages, and it would all point to her. It would give me time. I never thought you'd clear her." He hadn't known about the encrypted partition. He had just wiped the surface, inadvertently preserving the very evidence he thought would save him. With Malik's confession secured, Roman walked down the hall to face the Queen. Celeste Sinclair was composed, her posture perfect, an island of icy calm. "Malik Crawford has confessed to murdering your husband," Roman said, watching her for any reaction. A flicker of something, relief, surprise, crossed her face before being suppressed. "Then it seems you have your killer, Detective. I'm glad this ordeal is finally over." "It's not over, Celeste," Roman said, pulling out a photo of Julian Croft and a copy of the bank transfers from her charity. "We know about Apex Solutions. We know you hired a fixer. We know you sent him to your husband's studio that night. Malik may have been the one to hold the knife, but you sent the storm that brought down the house." For the first time since the investigation began, Celeste Sinclair's composure shattered. The blood drained from her face as she stared at the evidence. She had believed her plan was untraceable, a ghost transaction hidden within her philanthropic work. "I didn't tell him to kill Preston," she whispered, her voice tight with panic. "I just told him to stop him, to get the research, to make him see reason." It was a confession of its own kind. She hadn't ordered the murder, but she had knowingly and willingly set a violent chain of events in motion. She had tried to wield a thug like a surgical tool, and her arrogance had contributed to her husband's death as surely as Malik's rage. She had intended to commit a crime to protect her secrets, and in doing so, had become entangled in a far greater one. The two separate plots had finally been brought into the light, and both conspirators were caught in the glare. The trials of Malik Crawford and Celeste Sinclair were separate but equally sensational. Malik, facing the irrefutable evidence of his confession, was found guilty of second-degree murder. The jury acknowledging the crime was born of rage rather than premeditation. He was sentenced to 25 years to life. His ambition, once his greatest asset, had led him to a cage. Celeste's trial was a masterclass in legal maneuvering. Her lawyers argued she was a victim, a wife trying to protect her family from her husband's irrational obsessions. They claimed she had hired Julian Croft merely to retrieve sensitive documents. But the prosecution, armed with the timing of the payments and Croft's own testimony, given in exchange for immunity, painted her as a cold, calculating conspirator. She was convicted of conspiracy to commit assault and a slew of financial crimes related to her use of the charity's funds. Her sentence was lighter than Malik's, 10 years, but for a woman whose entire existence was predicated on her reputation and freedom, it was a life sentence. The Sinclair Devereaux legacy she had fought so violently to protect was now forever tainted by a prison record. Savannah Monet faded from the headlines. Though cleared of all charges, the public stigma clung to her. She deleted her social media, sold her expensive gifts, and disappeared, her life as a fantasy creature destroyed by a brief intersection with a violent reality. Months later, Roman Griggs stood on the overgrown plot of land in Wilkes County. The crime scene tape was gone, the air still and quiet, filled with the scent of pine and damp earth. Following the instructions left with his lawyer, Preston Sinclair's remaining assets, though diminished, had been used to purchase the land. It was now in the hands of a historical trust, with plans to begin the archaeological work Preston had envisioned. Roman looked at the crumbling foundation of the main house, and then at the faint outline of the cabin where Preston's story had truly begun. The tragedy, he reflected, wasn't just about a broken partnership or a threatened inheritance. Its roots ran deeper, back into the soil beneath his feet. It was born from the secrets that history buries and the violent lengths people will go to keep them buried. Preston had tried to unearth a painful truth, to use his success to acknowledge and perhaps atone for a crime far older than his own murder. Celeste and Malik, in their own ways, had tried to kill that truth. They sought to protect a fragile present by erasing the past, but they had failed. The lesson, Roman thought as he turned to leave, was etched into the very landscape. Truth is resilient. It can be buried for generations, hidden under layers of wealth, status, and denial, but it never truly dies. It waits patiently in the silence, in the earth, in the archives, and eventually it will find a way to the surface, demanding to be seen. The attempt to suppress it is often the most destructive act of all, for it is in the unearthing of our shared, often painful history that we find the only true path forward. Preston Sinclair had lost his life in that pursuit, but in the end, his legacy of truth had won.